Today we're looking at a PlayStation 5 Self clean gone wrong. The customer took this PlayStation 5 board apart in an attempt to clean it. As they were doing so, they managed to rip off the fan connector. As you can see right here, just where the Wi-Fi IC is, there is meant to be a little connector here. Now luckily I have said connector, and it looks to be relatively clean. I have no idea where the pads have actually gone from it. I didn't take them off and they're not on the board. If we go over to the scope, you'll be able to see the damage that we have here. Let me explain what we're actually missing. We're missing a ground pad here, which anchors the port into place, as well as another anchoring point here. This should also be ground. The middle connector here is ground, so theoretically we don't even need this, but I will keep it here just for added strength, I guess. I need to double check and make sure that these aren't ground, but I believe this should be supplying the 12-volt power, and this is more so a data line. I'm going to test. So again, this is ground here and this is ground here. This pin should be ground, so it's okay if we've got the rips here, that's fine. This is all okay. So when I go ahead and put the fan connector back on, I'm going to need to mask this up first of all. Same width, I'm going to assume here, because this is ground. And because this is the data line and because this is our power, we can't have it bridging with ground, because in that scenario, it's then just not going to work. First port of call then is to just put a tiny bit of solder mask here. Again, it doesn't really matter over this side because it's ground. However, I am just going to put a blob there. And more importantly, we need a bit here as well. Smooth it out so it's not as thick as that, so it dries a bit easier. I might have put a bit too much on here, but that's okay. It's better than nothing, that's for sure. There we go. That seems a little bit better for us to work with. Like I said as well, here's our connector. So our connector is going to go roughly about here, in which case it shouldn't be touching any of those anyway. So that's where our connector is going to go. So we need to bear that in mind when we're putting our anchoring points up here. I'm going to take my grinding pen now, and we're just going to make our anchoring points just by grinding away at the PCB here. Okay, do we have to do much more? Is that okay? Do we need to go a little bit deeper? I think we need to go a tiny bit deeper there. There we go. And exactly the same for this side over here. And again, a quick clean just to make sure all good. That looks fine to me. Now we need to grind just about here to reveal that. We'll do ground anyway, because again, why not? Actually, no. I lied. I'm actually going to make a cut here. Just like that. Now I think I'll do the same for this bit as well. Just here. I could have got away with using the trace that we had here and the trace that we had here. However, I want the connection to be as stable as possible. And what I don't want this doing is pushing the wire up and therefore creating a little bit of an awkward angle for the wire that goes underneath the connector. I think I could take this bit off now as well, actually, saying that. There we go. Our working station is now looking a little bit better. Now I'm going to measure out some wickety wick. And again, I want this to be as close to the top as possible because that's where that's where we need to anchor it. So it's probably going to be about here. So I do need to cut that a bit more. I want to say like that. Yeah, that looks good. And we'll move it right over here. Okay, so that's one. This is to anchor the port down, by the way, to give it a strong bond between the actual connector and the port. There we go. So we should have two. If I move that up. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right. Okay, so now that we have those two bits of solder braid sorted, I'm going to move them over. Move this one over. We're now going to apply our leaded solder and flux. Oh, I've lied. I've not sorted this bit out. Or this bit. Take our flux now, put a bit there, a little bit up here, a little bit here, and a little bit there. We have our leaded solder. We're just going to tin up the area. Perfect. There we go. Take our first bit of braid. I'm just going to hold it down just like that. Just try and tack it down correctly, which is probably going to be about here. Make sure that wire isn't going to be touching the wire over the other side. Exactly the same with this bit of braid. And we're just going to move this bit up a little bit. I'd say around about there. There we go. Now for the very fun part, we are just going to flood the braid with solder. Just like that. Same with the other side. And this is going to help us create a very, very good, strong bond between the braid and the connector. Again, I'm just moving this over, make sure it doesn't clash with this trace wire that we'll put here. Clean as we go. So just give everything a quick clean. Make sure we try and get this flux out of the way. There we go, we're looking good. Now just a drop of flux on our little homemade trace pads and taking our enameled wire and just tacking it down to that. There we go. Just going to see if I can get a slightly better connection on that, more solder. There we go. Yeah, that one's solid. Take our knife and cut it just about here. And we simply just rinse and repeat that process. Again, this is ground, so it's not massively necessary. However, if I can just get the job done to the best of my ability, that will make me happy. There we go. And again, a nice precise cut about here. And last but not least, again, make sure that's soldered fully, which it looks like it. Cut away at this wire just about there. Perfect. Now it's all about heating it up and giving everything a clean in a downwards motion so that we don't mess the wires up that we have here. So again, just using a light heat, isopropyl alcohol, and I'm now just using a brush to swipe downwards, and then it should be nice and clean. There we go. Now we just come back in for a little bit of straightening. Just to make sure that none of the wires are going to touch. There we go. Take some of our conformal coating and just place it on our connections here, on our traces. Maybe spread it across. And up. Again, more so ensuring that things don't short together, I guess. So I will put some a little bit further down. And just thin it out as much as I can as well. There we go. Now we're going to cure that. I've just used the UV to cure it, but sometimes I also like to use the hot air just to help speed up the process a little bit, about 150 degrees Celsius. Last but not least, we simply just need to tin the wires that we have here so that they accept solder when we go to put the fan connector on. I do that by simply just applying a bit of flux and then dragging the iron down just like this to give the wires some solder. There we go. Now we put the fan connector on. Okay, so we'll go ahead and tack this down, this side down first over here. Once you get that first bit soldered, I think it's okay. Just need to pull up a little bit and do it that side as well. So I'm going to rotate the board. There it is, just this way. Okay, like I said, rotate that a little bit. Actually about there. Come back a tiny bit. There we go. And that is now solid. However, what I am going to do is just add a tiny bit of flux on this side and on the other side. And then triply push down on the connector. Just to make sure it's definitely taking that solder, which I believe it is. My iron's turned off mid-flow. There we go, that's the one. Solid. And again, just on this side. There we are. Perfect. Not perfectly straight, obviously. The most satisfying part, we just add a tiny bit of flux to each pin. Just down here. And try and make that connection with them. I'm going to add a tiny bit of solder to my iron as well. Just hopefully help with that process. Make sure we get a nice solid connection here with all of them. And there we go. Heat up and clean with my little brush. Melt that flux quickly, like that. Nice proper alcohol. And like I said, just give the area a little clean. And there we have it. Not the best looking thing in the world, but it never will be. So that's all good. That looks like it might have actually joined with ground here, which is nice. And this is moving freely, which is nice. Let's check and see if we get the correct diode readings. Quick check in continuity. So I should have ground on the middle pin, which I do. I shouldn't have ground on this pin, which I don't. And I shouldn't have ground on this pin, which I don't. That's really, really good. In diode mode, I should get nothing on the middle pin because, again, it's ground, which we don't. We should get 0.6 or so here. 0.45, yep, that's about right. And we should get the same for this one on the end. 0.532. So, should be all good. If this one or this one was connected to ground, we would get a straight reading of 0, which is what we do not get. If I measure on here, it's going to be the same. That's good, 0.4. That's good, 0.5. And that's good ground. So I'm going to test quickly. And then once I'm happy on my test, I'll come back in with some conformal coating and just make sure that none of these pins will potentially bridge together in the future just by putting it in between. Let's give it a quick test. Okay, here's our little test rig set up. Again, we have the front I/O board connected, as well as the fan connector and the LED. So hopefully, if we push this, we should see the fan spin, which we do. Look at that. That is repaired. Whilst we're here, I might as well just, yeah, there we go. Nice. Let's go put some conformal coating on it. Now we know it works. Just big blobs, formal coating, just in between and around it. Again, this doesn't help or reinforce in any way, shape or form the strength of the port. You could argue that it will ever so slightly. However, this is more so just to protect it from shorting out with each of the pins. There we go. Now we just cure it. I'd say along with no power and HDMI ports, this is the most common thing that we get, not just with PS5s, but it happens with PlayStation 4s as well. For example, again, people just go ahead and start cleaning it and they rip off the fan connector, albeit by accident, but it turns out to be a costly accident. There's no point in me showing you the console working because you've just seen it working, but that should be a good job well done. And again, the most important thing, a really happy customer. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.